At our insurance agency, we talk a lot about the limits of liability on a business auto policy, not only for our clients, but for our prospects. Our standard operating procedure is to provide $1 million of combined single limit for bodily injury and property damage. We also like to match the uninsured motorist and underinsured motorist if you're in California for the $1 million. But there's a good reason for this, and I want to tell a story about a situation I came across last week while working, and the reason why is really, really important, not just for your protection and the protection of your company, but also for the protection of your employees and drivers. Hey guys, my name's Mike and thank you for joining me on another video. Remember guys, if you like my videos, please give me a thumbs up. It really helps support our channel. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when I release the next videos. We try to release 2 every single month, getting a lot of good feedback on them. Drop your comments below if you have any. I respond to every single one. Business auto liability limits, nothing to play around with. I have a client whose brother was working for a contractor. He had a company-owned vehicle that he drove. This contractor was in the electrical business, and somehow, I don't know who wrote this policy. I don't know if it was something they bought online or if they found an agent that was willing to write a policy with minimum limits, but they had 15,000, 30,000 bodily injury limits. That means 15,000 per person, 30,000 per accident for bodily injury if the driver of their vehicle is at fault in an accident, if they're liable in an accident. And they also had $15,000 for property damage. That means for third-party property damage, if their driver or any driver on their policy was at fault in an accident, the insurance company had $15,000 of coverage available to fix the third-party property. The situation, brother was driving, company-owned auto, caused an accident. He was at fault. The other driver sustained pretty severe injuries, and the policy only had $15,000 there to pay for that driver's injuries. You know, whether that be medical bills, the ambulance stay in the hospital, any surgeries, any lost time from work, whatever it may be, $15,000. That's way too low on any type of policy. I don't care if you own a business, if you don't own a business, if you has assets or not. That's going to leave somebody hanging. And in this case, not only did it leave the business owner hanging, and I don't know the business owner. I didn't speak to the business owner. So I don't know if he made the decision to carry those limits. I mean, he's going to have to sign a proposal, obviously, right? So the proposal was put in front of him. At some point, he had the decision to make whether he thought those limits were adequate, but I didn't speak to him. And the crazy thing is if you think about it, the employee had no knowledge of the limits. You know, obviously the employee can ask, they can ask for proof of coverage, ask how much liability they carry before they drive to make sure that they're protected. But in most cases, an employee is not going to think that way. So in this case, this employee, who was the brother of a client, had no idea that the limits of liability were this low. Got in the accident, a lawsuit came back on the owner of the business, and at this point, has brought the employee in on a personal level. The employee received an affidavit for financial status from an attorney, from the plaintiff attorney, which is the injured third party. The injured third party is claiming injuries north of $400,000, and this policy literally had $15,000 to pay. So now the employee is getting dragged in, and the employee no longer works for the company. That's another crazy thing, right? This employee terminated their employment with that company last year. The accident happened before that, and still it's an ongoing situation where he has to be involved, and he was just working for somebody else. The story really is something that floored me. I mean, I sent it to my team. I actually posted it on LinkedIn also, but this is the reason why it's really important as a business owner that you make proper decisions. I mean, think about it. How much more could it really cost on an annual basis for you to raise your limits of liability to an adequate level of at least $1 million? Some carriers allow $2 million on the underlying policy, but there's always the umbrella and the excess available to increase those $1 million limits if it doesn't go above that. In our opinion, and in my opinion, maybe besides workers' compensation, which covers employee injury or illness, the business auto policy is probably where the most exposure lies. Driving exposure for a business, whether the vehicles are driven, whether it's company-owned vehicles or even employee-owned vehicles, or even rented or leased autos that are being used in the course of business as a business owner and as a company, is a huge exposure. Probably the second biggest exposure. Even more so, management liabilities become very big, especially EPLI, employment practices liability insurance. But business auto is something that's every single day, all the time. People are on the road, especially in businesses where, you make your money driving, whether it's contracting, whether it's service, whether it's livery, whether it's driving to meet clients, any type of sales related job, any type of services job where you have to go to different job sites, you're on the road all day long. So that's a huge exposure because the likelihood of an accident happening is a lot higher because of that reason. So 15,000, 30,000 limits in California, particularly. I mean, now the limits have been raised to a higher standard, 30,000, 60,000 for bodily injury is the minimum. I mean, that's far too low for the proper protection of the business, the ownership of the business, and any employees of the business, anyone working for the business, that's way too low. And this is a perfect example why. So take a look at your business auto policy. Understand what limits of liability you carry. Understand the reason that you have those limits, and talk to your agent, talk to your broker to decide whether if that's the right fit for you, because anything under $1 million should be discussed, but really it should never drop below 500,000 in my opinion. And that would be if you have budgetary restraints or you have money issues and you can't afford it. But really it should never be below $1 million. 500,000 at an absolute minimum. If you have vehicles that in some states like California, if the gross vehicle weight is 10,000 or more, you have to have 750,000 in liability and above for good reason, because heavier vehicles create higher liabilities and more injuries and more property damage. If you need help reviewing your business auto policy, if you have any questions about business auto and how the coverage works, you can reach us directly 858-384-1506 or hello@foagency.com. Remember guys, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when I release the next video. And if you have questions, comments, concerns, leave them here. I reply to all of them. Thanks so much for watching. See you on the next video soon.